Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome back to the show. We're super excited today. We have Sherri Gallagher with us today, and she is an expert in quality and consultant in ISO 9001 and ISO 14001. I want to welcome you to the show, Sherri. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, Marcus.
Absolutely. Great. I appreciate you spending the time with our audience today. So let's get right to it. Tell us about your business and the types of clients that you're helping.
Well, Technacon Company, in my capacity there, I work with small to medium manufacturers to increase long-term profits. I'm most effective working with companies that are typically 20 to 50 million in sales or have around 100 employees. But I've worked with companies as small as $1 million in sales and 2 employees. Overall, my motto is that profit is not a 4-letter word, and I finally got to the point in time I've been saying that so long that I wrote a book about it, which is due out in a few months. What I do is I look to use whatever systems I put in place to give my clients long-term profitability. My favorite place to look is for waste is in the scrap bin, and there's an awful lot of profit that just gets thrown out with the trash.
Wow, I bet you a lot of companies don't realize that they're throwing profit out the door. So that's fantastic. And you have a book coming out. That is wonderful. So tell me, it sounds like, obviously you've got a lot of expertise in this. You've written a book and helping companies turning those types of things into profit. What would you say is the advantage of a company, being a client of yours or working with it? How do you go about helping those companies more specifically?
Well, typically I go through and look at where they're at and what their need is. They'll have a project. Perhaps they have a client that said, okay, I want ISO 9001 or I want ISO 14001, which 14001 is the environmental standard. Suppose they want the quality standard and they've got a client who wants it. It's a little intimidating sometimes to people as to how to accomplish that. And I go through and I look at and show them, look, here's where you already have the standard. You're doing these things, and this is what the standard's asking you to do. Now, here's some spots where we don't have it, and I work them through and walk them through how to accomplish the standard without having to rewrite or reorganize their entire company. They wouldn't be in business, they wouldn't be making profits now if they didn't have some sort of systems that worked. So how do we make those systems, tweak them to make them a little bit better, but how do we demonstrate that they meet the standards so they can meet the client's needs, they can increase their sales, they can increase their profitability?
Got it. That's excellent. What led you into this field, Sherri, and what got you started doing this?
Well, my first job was as an industrial engineer with a pharmaceutical company. And the facilities were duplicated in Puerto Rico, and the only way they would leave the plant open that we were at was if we were continuously profitable. So my job was to create balanced lines, optimize the labor, and make sure we remained profitable so that the 500 people working on the site could stay employed. Now, it was an ethical house, a very big name, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. Okay. And the culture of the facility was to make sure that it was a quality product. And our litmus test was, would you give this medicine to your child? If the answer was no, you're not selling it. And it was the foundation for how I approach business and how I approach clients today. How can I make my clients better for having hired me? They should gain something more than just the equivalent of what they spent on me. How do I help them grow their business? How do I help them stay in business and employ people? And, with a pharmaceutical background, it was only natural that I would gravitate toward quality systems as a way to accomplish that.
Wow, that's excellent. That sounds like you're taking something that is considered a cost and turning it actually into a profit center with helping them with these quality processes that you're putting in place.
Well, and that's one of the most common misconceptions that I run into with people is that ISO is just a cost of doing business. You got to spend a certain amount to get the auditor in. You get them in and out as quick as you can, hope they don't find too much, and forget about it until the next audit. I can tell you I've got a client right now that had that kind of system, and they brought me in. I mean, it was a bunch of paper procedures, and it was the responsibility of the management representative, and no one else in the company even knew what the procedures said. So they brought me in and asked me to clean up the system and make it something usable. They heard what I said about ISO can be profitable. So the first thing we did was we switched it to a paperless system and put everything up on the network. Then we switched it over so every manager was responsible for the documentation, the procedures, and the work instructions in their area. And when they were free to make changes in there, and they just had to notify the management representative that they had done so. Then they used those documents as tools to train their people. It empowered their people. Their people knew what was going on, knew how to do their jobs, knew where to go back to check if they didn't know how to do something. And we ended up making rejects drop by 15%. We had complaints going away. It was overall, people were happier, employees were much, much happier that they were able to control their own situation. So it was quite simple. We got rid of a lot of complaints. We got rid of a lot of rejects because people knew what they were supposed to do and how they were supposed to do it. There wasn't the scrap going out. So we weren't paying, one, for waste haul away. Two, we weren't throwing things away that we'd spent money on. All of that went to the bottom line and increased the company's profit. They said one of the best things they had ever done was switch over on ISO 9001 to making it a real system.
Perfect. That's a win-win-win situation. A win for the company profit-wise, and win for the customers getting a better product, and win for the employees. I mean, I don't think you can get much better than that. So along the way, I talk a lot with business owners and entrepreneurs, and there's always something or someone that inspires them along the way. Can you think of anything or anyone that inspired you to help you be where you are today?
Well, there was one manager, Arlen Liddell, who was absolutely awesome. And, I am assuming that he is retired at this point in time. But when you look at it, when I read Deming and I read Duran, and I read Crosby, those were the original guys who were over in Japan making a difference. Deming was a very clear statistician. Duran was a really cool dude. I mean, think about this. Here he is. He's an industrial engineer, and he's working in the automotive industry. It's in the Depression, and he's worried that there's not going to be any business. So he goes out and he gets a law degree and passes the bar so that he has something to fall back on if manufacturing goes away. This is in the 1930s. I mean, he was an amazing individual, very dry sense of humor. And then Philip Crosby had just such a simple way of bringing the common touch to it. A lot of what happens when you start talking about quality and people get involved with Lean and Six Sigma and statistical process control is that it becomes very intimidating. Well, I haven't done math in 30 years when I graduated college. How am I going to understand all the statistics? Philip Crosby took it so that the average guy who graduated high school could understand the concept that quality makes the company money. So all of them are just so amazing to read and to listen to and to find videos on. Quality is free. It still applies just as much today as it did when it was written back in the 1980s.
Yeah, those names, especially Deming, I've heard his name come up in a few different conversations. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that with you. And that's great passion. I can hear it in your voice. And your clients obviously appreciate your passion and helping them as well. So, Sherri, talk about what really drives you and what gives you your passion to get out of bed in the morning and help the people that you're helping.
That's a hard question to answer. I like to help people. I like to see businesses grow. I like to see the smiles on the face. If you can create a situation where people are secure, people are happy at what they're doing, then you've made the world a little bit better. Nobody wants to be on the dole. People want to work. They want to do a good job. And if you tap into that and you give them the opportunity, then you can go anywhere you want. You can make anything great. You can grow absolutely any business. But you got to tap into it. You got to believe your people, and they've got to believe in you as a business owner, that you care and that you understand what they're talking about. You don't have to give them everything. You don't have to open up your tax returns and tell them, see, I'm in the same boat as you. But you have to listen to what they have to say, and you have to make them part of growing the business. And if you do that, they'll stay with you forever, and they'll work as hard as they can with everything they've got to make your company grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Deming said the point of business is to stay in business, to grow, to be profitable, and to employ people. People who are in it to get in quick, make a quick buck, and get out, I have a hard time helping them. Quality is a long-term proposal. It's constantly getting better. It's going out there and seeing, how can I do this just a little bit better today? What can I do to take a penny's worth of cost out of it? What can I do to get it delivered a day earlier? How do I make it so that my customers are that much more satisfied? And it just becomes a big game. How do you make it better?
Excellent. I like your reference to making a game because, when you're having fun, and it sounds like you're having fun helping those people and your clients, it makes it go so much better and so much easier, and that's wonderful. That's excellent.
It's nice to be able to help companies. And it's fun when you walk in and you see everybody smiling. When you walk in and you see everybody trying to keep their head down and not making eye contact and so worried, that's a sad place to be. And there's a way to make that a difference. There's a way to make people empowered. And it sounds crazy, but ISO 9001 is one of the ways to do that. There's a lot of talk going on right now that there's a new revision of ISO 9001 out there. And a lot of people are really scared because they changed all the numbering, and it sounds like it's really different. But it's not. You can take what you've got and build on it. What it does is it talks about empowering. It talks about looking at who's involved in and who's interested in whether or not your business survives. Well, there's your suppliers, there's your customers, and there's your employees. And, oh, hey, what about that? There's also the business owner. So if all of these people are interested in this company's success, then how do we capitalize on that? Now, how do we eliminate risks? How do we eliminate liabilities? If you look at what has been in the news for the past few years, when you talk about the issues with baby formula, when you talk about the flooring that's coming in and it's got VOCs in it when it's not supposed to, how did those things happen? What is the risk that our company is going to have that kind of a problem? What's out there? Where are we putting it at risk? Now, how do we prevent it? That's really the direction that the revision in ISO has taken. And it's also taken it so that you can use, a service industry can use it. They've tried to make it more convenient for every company out there. A travel agent can use it just as easily as a manufacturer. Now, manufacturers have been on the bandwagon for 2 decades, but the service industry can really get out there and differentiate themselves and make it an advantage if they do it right.
That's a great point. Service-based businesses, it's all about processes and the quality and the control and making sure that everything's running well. So that's phenomenal that they're adjusting that so that it's not just manufacturing, that these other businesses can take advantage of the things that you just mentioned with what ISO can bring to their business if it's positioned correctly. So that's excellent. You mentioned one of the biggest misconceptions is that ISO isn't a profit center, and you've written a book about that. Talk a little bit about that big misconception that the business owners have and about how you can help them actually turn that into a profit center, and you talk about it in your book as well.
Well, when they look at it, the first thing they think is they have to add people. You don't. You don't have to add anybody at all. There's no need for a management rep. There's no need for adding a staff of inspectors. What it talks about, if you actually look at ISO, is it talks about preventing problems. Now, if you can prevent problems, you prevent waste. If you prevent waste, you reduce cost. You reduce cost, you can either reduce your price, you can increase your profitability, or you can reduce your lead times. When you look at an overall project, it has 3 elements to it: time, scope, and resources. How do you balance those out? Now, when you look at the management review section of ISO 9001, what they're doing is it's looking at and saying, how do you strategically place your business? Where are your clients going? You've identified that your interested parties are these specific customers in this specific industrial niche. Well, if that's the case, then where is that industry going? How do you get ahead of it? So ISO 9001 isn't just about inspecting quality in or, putting checks in a box or adding all sorts of documentation. You don't have to write a procedure at all. I've got clients that actually, instead of having procedures, have videos so that they can train people and that are referenced on people who have an actual computer in front of them. And if they want to figure out how to do something, fill out a specific form, how to address a specific issue with a customer, there's a video there. They pull it up really quick, like looking at YouTube, and they not only hear, they not only read, but they see someone doing the job, and it makes it easier. ISO 9001 doesn't constrain you. It makes you expand and grow. And when people look at it strictly as a quality system that's going to force me to inspect things and going to force me to have test results, they're missing the boat, and they're only getting the most costly part of ISO 9001.
Gotcha. So that makes a lot of sense. So can you describe to us a situation where you've actually gone into a client, overcome those challenges, and set them up for success and for profit, and turn the ISO into a profit?
Well, there was the one company I spoke about before where we reduced the complaints and the returns by 15%. There was another company, and it kind of made me laugh. They had been ISO 9001 certified for over a decade, and they wanted to go to a new standard. There's medical standards, and there's aerospace and automotive standards, which use all of the elements of ISO and then add others. So they wanted me to help them go to this new standard. So the first thing I said is, okay, well, let me look at your ISO documents and see what you've got. And I read through them, and I did a stage 1 audit, which is looking at the documentation. And I walked in and I said, okay, in looking at your documentation, I'm seeing some conflicts here. Can you show me what you actually do so that we can resolve these conflicts? Because you got a starting point where you're telling someone, if they're doing a job, you're telling them 2 different ways to do it, which one of them can't work. So they looked at me, gave me this very strange look, and they said, you actually read that stuff? We haven't.
Jeez. Wow.
So that was a starting point. So I said, okay, fine. Let's take a step back. And we walked through and said, how are you doing things? How do you manage your suppliers? How do you get new suppliers in and know they're not, giving you a story, and if you give them an order today, they'll be in business tomorrow? So we talked about controlling suppliers, and they kind of had a system, so we documented that, but we looked at some of the problems that they were facing and some of the issues that they were facing. They had a supplier who only the owner knew how to manufacture that product that they were using, and it was a key product in their process. And if he went fishing, which he did frequently, the plant shut down. So they were at this huge risk that if something happened to this guy, they were out of business. So we looked at it and we helped them qualify another supplier. And they were in the process of doing the qualification run when they found out that the original supplier had gone on vacation and somebody at the plant had run product for them and shipped it in, and it was no good, and it had contaminated everything that they had. So they had to flush it from their system. And thankfully, we have been testing out this supplier. We did the qualification run. They were capable. We were able to turn them on immediately, and we only had a delay of 2 days on their shipments when it could have been a disaster that would have put them out of business. So that was the start of the process, and that was one of the places where we worked on it. In process, they had many, many steps that were very qualified, and we took some of them out because the process was almost foolproof. You couldn't make it wrong. So why are you doing a measurement check? And we reduced their cost of inspection. And then we got to the end item testing. We got to how they interacted with their customers, and we got tracking what it was that were bothering their customers. And then we had them do a customer survey, which is a requirement of ISO 9001, and they started finding out the directions that their customers' businesses were migrating. And they were able to jump ahead. Their customers really needed to be able to have an open portal on site to place orders. They were able to jump ahead, create that, and bam, they took off in the market. In 1 year's time, they have doubled their business.
Wow, that's significant. That's huge.
Yeah, and it was all just from going, instead of looking in, okay, what have I got to spend to get this plaque on the wall, to saying, how can I use this to grow my company? Not just to sell it, but to actually grow it. So that's where I have fun with ISO 9001, because a lot of people have taken a lot of time to look at this and figure out what works for a lot of different businesses. And it's written so it applies to a lot of different businesses. That was one of the issues when we started out with the gurus. There was the Crosby system, there was the Deming system, there was the Duran system. When you were trying to sell into Japan, they had their own systems, and, they were interested in buying from you, and there was 1,000 variations of yes, but they never bought anything. And so ISO took all of the experience of so many people and so many businesses and brought it in line to say, here's how we can make it general enough for everybody, but to guide you and make things better. And I think that's really an amazing thing.
Yes, absolutely. Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. So thank you for sharing that. So what would be the first thing that a listener should do if they're ready to improve their quality, their systems, their processes? How would they start the process?
Well, I would say call me. The first thing I would have them do is buy a copy of the standard. Now, that can be intimidating. What I do when I walk in most times is I show them what the standard is, and then I walk them through and say, okay, let's walk through your plant. And I show them as we walk through their plant, see, you got this part of the standard here, and you got that part of the standard there. Sometimes that's hard to see just from reading, you shall control your suppliers. Well, what does that actually mean? Well, how do you eliminate risk from your suppliers? So if they can talk to someone who's had experience in it, it walks them through. But if they want to try and do it on their own, I would say the first thing you need to do is buy a copy of the standard and read it. It's, I think, 28 pages. It's in a number of different languages. You can take your native language. It's pretty plain English. That's the version I use. And, read down through it. And then talk to somebody who's done it before. I'm always happy to help people. If they've got a question, give me a call. I had one person call me up and he says, I've got 3 employees. Right now I'm at $500,000 in sales. If I can do this and I can implement ISO 9001, I can take my business to $2 million in sales. But I haven't got a clue how to start. And so we sat down together and I started laying it out for him, the questions that he needed to ask of himself and his staff and to look for in his business. So that's where I would start, is just get the standard.
Okay, perfect. So where can they find more information about finding out more about the ISO standards, contact you? How would they go about doing that?
Well, the best way to contact me is to call my business phone. The number is 708-814-3685. And it's not just call me and I'll help you. There's a lot of consultants out there that'll borrow your watch to tell you the time. They can check out my website. It's Technacon.com. It's pretty straightforward. My company name, Technacon. And I've got a lot of posts on there about ISO 9001 and the differences to the new version of 2015. But call me because every single business is different. Every single business has a different culture. And this is not a case of you moving your culture around, moving your people around, and changing what you do to fit a standard. This is taking your culture and your business and showing how the standard is implemented in it. And that's a critical point. Auditors who understand the industry are going to understand the variations between businesses, and they're not going to be put off by that. It's not a single mold that you have to fit your company into. And you can spend a lot of money and waste a lot of time trying to do that. I talk to people who they have small business owners often won't meet with peer groups. And they'll talk to another member of their peer, and that peer may actually be doing ISO. And they'll say, oh, let me have your procedures, and I can implement them in my company. It won't work. It won't fit. You're different companies. You've got different people. You're doing different things. So if you talk to me, I can look at it, and I can see how you meet the standard. And that's the difference.
Awesome. Excellent. Sherri, talk about your new book. What's the title? What's the premise of it, and when do you expect it to launch?
Okay, the name of it is Profit is Not a 4-Letter Word. It seems like sometimes business owners are just they're being inundated with, aren't you awful to own a business? Oh, you horrible capitalist, why aren't you, giving away all of your money? Well, businesses being in business should make a profit. If you're going to take the risk to go out there and take an idea and invest in it and maybe risk your house, you ought to be able to be rewarded for that. And so the whole book is talking to the small to medium-sized business owner saying, okay, where do you start? How do you keep score, whether or not you're getting better or you're getting worse? How do you motivate your people? How do you work with your employees so they want to stay around and earn the gold watch, get the gold watch after 20 years of service instead of jumping ship after 6 months? There's a lot of terms out there like lean and Six Sigma. Frankly, my favorite is world class. And people will say, oh, well, we do lean. Well, and somebody else will say, oh, well, we do Six Sigma. They're not mutually exclusive. But how does a small business owner understand what they are? So I took and kind of put them in simple terms. I wrote it as if I was talking to a person. So, I'll use idioms and silly sentences and, how do you keep your staff from picking the fly poop out of the pepper? Yeah. What do you do when you're up to your ears in alligators? How do you remember the original objective was to drain the swamp? I use those kinds of phrases because I want people to be able to sit down and read this and understand without having to get out a textbook or go on YouTube for a video on calculus or statistics. It's small. It's about 150 pages, and it's got a lot of pictures and a lot of diagrams, but it tells you how do you do a cost of quality report? How do you fill out a FMEA diagram, failure mode and effect analysis? What is a turtle diagram? What is a fishbone diagram? When do you use which one? Is it applicable to your business? What's risk-based thinking? Who had it right? Was it Deming? Was it Duran? Was it Crosby? Was it Schuhart? Was it Taguchi? Who are these guys? Do they even apply today? So I go through all of those quick, simple terms. You can read it comfortably. Hopefully it won't put you to sleep. It won't be one of those tomes, if you've got insomnia, read this. I try and make you laugh. I think humor gets us through the day. And that's really what the little book is about. And I'm hoping to get it out by the end of this quarter.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sherri. You gave a lot of golden nuggets out here for our listeners. So really appreciate you being on our show today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Have a great day. Well, there you have it, folks, for this edition of the show. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.